Pakistan is on the brink of collapse, as the country is struggling to cope with growing debt, inflated energy import costs, dwindling foreign exchange reserves, global inflation, political instability, and slowdown in GDP growth. The public is getting agitated at the turn of events. Long queues of vehicles, massive blackouts, desperate fights for food has become a norm in the country. To understand the gravity of the problems that Pakistan is currently facing, one needs to look into the history of Pakistan. The Islamic Republic of Pakistan, formed in 1947 after the partition of the British Indian Empire, was initially ranked among the emerging and growth-leading economies through its rapidly growing middle class. The country's political history since independence is characterized by periods of significant economic and military growth, as well as economic and political instability. As per IMF data, it has disbursed 21 loans to Pakistan over the years, the first request emerging from the country as early as 1958. The recent bailout is said to be the 13th on the IMF since the late 1980s. Having understood the root causes of trouble in the country, let us dig into the recent events that aggravated the situation. The devastating floods last year, adding to its unemployment and inflation, is an immediate trigger of the present economic crisis. The rise in food staples, owing to the extensive damage to agricultural land, livestock, thousands of kilometres of road and other infrastructure, has created a grave economic situation. The prices of essential commodities like wheat, onions, gas cylinders, etc. have been soaring high, causing panic and woe in every household. Everyday life is disrupted due to power outages, fuel shortage, especially in areas like Karachi, Islamabad, Lahore, and Peshawar. The war in Ukraine, another cog in the wheel, also played its part in increasing the price of food grains. Also, being an oil-reliant country, the constant decline in the value of the country's currency has resulted in much higher tariffs with every import of oil. But it was not a sudden event. Multitudes of factors play an important role in the current economic crisis. For instance, poor economic management, corruption, and excessive spending on defense and the armed forces. China, being an all-weather ally, surely has been helping its friend, but is it without any agendas? Here comes another problem, the debt trap diplomacy, of which China is infamous. Pakistan is definitely getting all the help that China is providing, but the high interest rate that China is charging on its loans is only worsening the situation. In addition to the already ballooning events, lack of investments made the situations dire in Pakistan. Falling confidence, coupled with low ranking by international rating agencies and grey listing of Pakistan in Financial Action Task Force, FATF, kept foreign investors away. According to a report by State Bank of Pakistan, foreign direct investment (FDI) inflows into Pakistan never exceeded 1% of GDP in the past 10 years. The outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic further deteriorated the situation. Major exporting items such as cement, textiles, leather and sport goods merely had any buyer during the pandemic. The nature of Pakistan's trade basket that imports essential items and exports non-essential items has played a large role in widening the gap between exports and imports. Pakistan imports mostly items of domestic consumption. How dramatic is the situation in Pakistan? Let's understand the intensity of the situation in pure layman terms. The average cost of a 20-kilo wheat flour bag in January 2022 was Pakistani rupee PKR 1,164.8. This shot up to PKR 1,736.5 in January 2023, a 50% rise. At the same time, there have been news reports suggesting that thousands of containers with essential food items, raw materials, and medical equipment are held up at ports due to a shortage of dollars. Depreciating currency and dwindling forex reserves are bound to make imports costly, which is worrying for Pakistan since it is highly reliant on imports and exports are eerily stagnant. The main export items, consisting of textiles and agriculture-related goods, were not performing well, owing to differing factors. What is the current state of account in Pakistan? The situation is such that the Central Bank of Pakistan has a paltry $4.4 billion in reserves, which is barely enough for 3 weeks of imports. Recently, the central bank increased its benchmark interest rate to 17%, the highest in more than 24 years. Pakistan's current GDP per capita income and GDP growth are the lowest in its neighbourhood. Only war-torn Afghanistan's economy is weaker. Pakistan's currency has been on the decline over the months due to the country's inability to repay its foreign debt. Its forex reserves fell to a 9-year low, reaching below $3 billion in early February 2023. This calls for a financial emergency-like situation, which any country is afraid of. What do you think is its future? The crisis has escalated to an extent that the government auctioned a Pakistani embassy property in the US. The government is even resorting to drastic measures like ordering shopping malls, restaurants, wedding halls and markets to shut down early, hoping that it would save the nation around $273 million or 62 billion Pakistani rupees towards energy imports. Pakistan has been running on foreign loans taken on high rates of interest. Moreover, due to the reluctance of the international community in extending loans to Pakistan, the country was forced to resort mainly to China and Saudi Arabia, and thus making it vulnerable to their complex terms. It will have to repay $80 billion in the coming 3 years. Is the government acting enough? The government, through the distribution sites, has been providing sasta or muft asta, low-cost and free flour, to people to ease their burden amid spiralling prices and the ongoing economic crisis in the country. But instead of doing good, the initiative caused trouble in several places where stampedes broke out, killing and injuring people. Pakistanis are putting their lives at risk to collect something as basic as a sack of flour. It illustrates how the rising cost of food and other necessities is driving desperation and impacting the masses. Authorities had turned off electricity during low usage hours to conserve fuel, but this blackout has been affecting the citizens, such that there has been riots and uneasiness everywhere in the country during the outages. Now let us look into how the public is coping up this situation. The public is enraged at the government for its inability to provide for the basic needs of its people. The World Bank has revealed that an alarming 6 million people are currently experiencing acute food insecurity as a result of the devastating floods and the present economic crisis. According to the World Flood Programme, this number is projected to increase. The death of livestock and the destruction of extensive date palms have made the life of those depending on it gruesome, and it's finding it difficult to get back to their feet in the challenging situation. Can organisations like the IMF help Pakistan navigate its economic crisis? Sure it can, but it comes at a cost. Normally it helps via financial assistance, technical expertise, policy advice and coordination to support economic growth, but such assistance usually comes with conditions that could be politically and socially difficult to implement. Find it bizarre to believe? Let me explain with the help of examples. Although the economic condition was in a mess, the floods brought unimaginable economic damage. The floods of 2022 derailed any semblance of economic recovery, and Pakistan failed to keep the promises it had made to the IMF when the EFF was sanctioned. For those of you who aren't aware, the Extended Fund Facility, EFF, was created to help nations dealing with severe payment imbalances brought on by structural barriers, poor growth, and an inherent weak balance of payments position. This resulted in the IMF deciding to refuse the release of the pending payment of $1.18 billion due to the government's unwillingness to meet certain demands, including assurances from Pakistan on increasing energy rates, imposing more taxes, and artificial control over the exchange rate. Now, coming on to the important part, what can be done to control the aggravating situation? In a country where half the population is under the age of 22, investing in the education and technical skills of youth can generate opportunities for a more sustainable economy. This situation has been under control ever since China promised economic growth through CPEC. But that dashing dream is almost shattered due to the recurring strikes, indifferent to Chinese diplomats, which have either halted or delayed many of the projects. Notably, CPEC created a Chinese debt of US $64 billion on Pakistan, which was originally valued at US $47 billion during 2014. What more can the government do? One major factor that has been hindering growth is corruption. This can be effectively addressed in transparency over spending, along with restructuring the country's economy, and excessive reliance on foreign debt is always on check. It can be without any doubt traced to Pakistan is racing against time, with misery piling up on the people as the wheels of global financing turn slowly. But what is the way forward for the country? Experts suggest that correcting imbalances in the economy through external borrowing is not a sustainable solution. Hence, for Pakistan, there is a need to bring structural economic reforms in its monetary and fiscal policy in line with international best practices. Economists are of the view that curbing unviable development projects, reducing import bills, and relying more on its domestic firms would possibly help Pakistan to avoid deepening the crisis further.